Welcome, everyone, to Bullock and Mustipher, a spirited conversation with Shannon Mustipher and Andrea Meriwether. My name is Hannah Zimmerman. I'm the marketing director at Locust Grove in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm now going to turn it on over briefly to our program director at Locust Grove, Brian Cushing. Brian, how's it going?
It's going really well. I hope you've had a chance to mix up one of the Clover Clubs for yourself because it is outstanding. I've never had anything like it before. If you don't have one right now, definitely go try it. It's great, very easy. So welcome to this Juneteenth celebration with us. Our amazing consultant, Andrea Meriwether, who's our partner in all things distilling and cocktails and African American history and all this, and does great work in the community, came to us with this whole idea. And the way, in her usual way, she made it very easy. And she got in touch with Shannon, who's been great getting to know over the past week, and brought us this amazing program. So I'm going to leave most of the introductions to Andrea, just because I think she could do a more thorough job at that than I can. But I do want to say that this is especially appropriate for today because all of this programming centered around spirits and cocktails and all that is kind of an offshoot of our small farm distillery project at Locust Grove. And hopefully you're familiar with that. If not, drop us a line, we'll get you familiar with it. Because the thing about the distillery is it's enticing, it's fun, it's really neat, but the real point is to have a window, to have a hook into the story of the whole farm at Locust Grove, the whole farm economy. And of course, that farm was being worked 200 years ago by enslaved African Americans. And so I think it's especially appropriate today for this celebration that we are having a program that is all wrapped up in that initiative. So you're not here to hear me talk, I know, so I am going to toss it either to Hannah or Andrea, whichever one's taking over after me.
That would be Andrea. Take it away, Andrea.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Wherever you are in the world, I'm so grateful for your time. This conversation is very near and dear to my heart. Tom Bullock just really had his life, obviously, because none of us were living at that time, had such an impression on mine. My introduction to the hospitality industry was started at the Pendennis Club in its current location on Muhammad Ali. Tom Bullock would have worked at the Mansion property in former Louisville. So I met Shannon at an industry event through another contact, and we just began to talk about our journey and our love of Tom, and just our past and our journeys were so similar. Shannon also worked as a barista, and as did I, and I just loved seeing how passionate that Shannon was about her craft, and that she was a writer, and that very much into history and how all of that ties into her as a mixologist and as a creator of color. I am so honored to have Shannon as a part of this discussion, but Shannon Mustipher really needs no introduction. She is a true industry heavyweight, a silent giant, as I like to call her, huge rum expert, educator, mixologist. She is the food and beverage director at Gladys Caribbean, a famed writer in her own right. She is the first African American working bartender to create a spirits book 103 years post Tom Bullock in 1917. I'm so honored. She was also nominated for a Spirited Award through Tales of a Cocktail, and Shannon is just a wonderful human being. She definitely has a love for people, and you see that when you meet her. So I want everyone to join me in welcoming Shannon Mustipher.
Andrea, I'm kind of speechless right now, but I have to say it's good to be here with you and everyone else today. I'll just go and let people know how we met. So this was earlier in the year. I want to say January or February.
Yes.
And I was a presenter at Sweet Culture, which is an amazing mobile bar conference where you learn how to apply classic cocktails and various techniques to that setting, you know, pop-ups, events, things where you have a little bit of space, but you still gotta you know, make it happen. And I have to say, it was a wonderful experience. But when I realized that I was going to be the first presenter, I was like, oh no, I did not get that. But it was great. Everyone was super fun. It was amazing meeting you and seeing the energy and passion that you pour into your work. And subsequently, or rather, you know, more lately, just finding out that, okay, here we got some sound problems. Hold on, guys.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It appears that our audience is having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you can.
I heard about that. Are you guys able to hear a little bit better now, or?
Yes, perfect. Sound is perfect.
All right, good. All right, so all I'm saying is it was amazing to meet you at SWIG. I love that experience. I thought it was amazing. I've been to a handful of conferences before, and they all had their good points, but this one just had a really excellent vibe, due in large part to you and your passion for education, which is where I think we connect. And then subsequently, you know, when we were planning this, and I learned that you worked at the infamous Penn Dentist Club, I was like, what? Wait a minute. So with that being said, I feel honored to be interviewed by you and to see, you know, what's going to come out of this conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. We share in this affinity for one another. So thank you so much. I really appreciated you coming to SWIG Culture. That was just a wonderful experience. It was the world's first mobile bar conference. I was able to be on the lead production for that spirits event. Shannon was our grand opening educator. She brought Tiki to the culture. So I was so honored to have her. And if you have not had the honor and privilege of sitting in an educational seminar with Shannon, hang on to your hats and your seats. I'm definitely going to bring Shannon to Louisville in 2021. So with her schedule permitting and all the other things that she has going on, we're definitely going to get her here. But I don't want to hold everyone. Yes, I don't want to hold everyone in suspense. We want to dive right into the conversation. So Shannon, I did share with you some information about Historic Locust Grove, the Cron family, William Cron being a member of the British Army and his affinity for rum. So rum is no stranger to the state of Kentucky. We do know that other farm properties and local historic properties that there was a rum affinity in the area. And I kind of just want to know if you can just give us some foundation about rum, if anyone on the call is new to rum culture, and maybe if you know anything about that period of the 1800s when rum would have started to come into the U.S.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to give a broad definition of rum. I imagine most people here know it, but it is a really big category and a little difficult to pin down. Rum is any liquor, or spirit rather, that's distilled from sugar. So that could be fresh juice. It could be molasses, which is a byproduct of sugar production. So when you boil down the juice, extract the crystals, what you have left over is molasses, and you can distill that. You could also use a combination of juice, crystals, and molasses. I mean, there's really no laws governing what, you know, type of sugar you're going to use. So that's the broad definition. You can make rum anywhere. It's not tied to a geographical location. In fact, at this moment, there are about 90 countries or locations where you can produce rum. And so that's the technical side of like what the substance is. Now, how does rum relate to the Americas? Okay, you got to go back to colonialism. Prior to the Spanish and the Portuguese beginning their exploration / colonialization / exploitation of the Americas, sugar was a very rare commodity. A gram of it cost about, you know, the equivalent of $1,000 today. So that was the powder, if you will. The Spanish and the Portuguese attempted to create a sugar trade as an alternative to the sugar trade that they found in Southeast Asia, on the Canary Islands, and in that era, respectively. They had modest success, and that was where they actually began to utilize slave labor from Africa. That was the first example of those plantations there. So when the Portuguese began to settle Brazil in the early 16th century, they realized that the New World was very amenable to sugar production, even more so than their initial experiments, and they just went all out with it. So there's a couple results that came out of that, and we'll dive a little deeper into that as we go along. But the initial result was that the transatlantic slave trade became a real thing because of the vast number of plantations that were quickly established in Brazil and later in Guyana, in the Caribbean as you move north, and the need for a large labor force was soon realized and brutally exploited. How does this relate to America as we know it? Well, the revenue generated by the sugar trade was on par with the gold rush and then later Silicon Valley. So if you look at planters in Barbados, you know, between 1650 and 1750, they went from having 8 odd sugar mills on the island to upwards of 80, even pushing 100. Basically, every square inch was covered in sugarcane. And these planters were generating income that rivaled what nobility in Europe had at their disposal. So it was a point of contention and led to numerous wars of liberation. Why do I mention Barbados? They're kind of like a prime example of what this sugar industry and adjacent rum trade look like, kind of like at its best, so to speak, and also at its worst. And Barbados brought the sugar industry to the Americas via the founding of Charlestown, where I'm born, actually, named after King Charles II, after they ran out of space for plantations on the island.
Thank you so much for your insight, Shannon. And everyone, I know that was a lot to digest and to dive into.
I know. Oh my God.
Shannon really gets into it, but we're going to kind of break apart what she talked about. So Shannon, in particular, if we go back to transatlantic slave trade and we talk about the revenue and the access and the labor that would be needed to take on the agricultural production side of sugarcane, even before we get to rum, would you say that that conversation of slave labor, land holding, still holds validity in the spirit space today?
Absolutely, especially now that, you know, the consumer wants to know, well, where did this come from? And I think a lot of people are thinking that question lies in, okay, what is the geographical area, A? B, what are the production practices or methods? And then, okay, well, who's the family behind it or who's the estate? You know, you see that conversation in a lot of spirits and in wine, but with rum, there's another layer behind it that doesn't come up because it's a little unsavory, but you can't really talk about rum without talking about the labor that established the economy that would produce that, you know, what we consider rum right now. You know, what people were initially producing doesn't really bear much resemblance to what you see on an average shelf, but that's where it comes from at the end of the day.
Yes, and I'll tell you, I also learned a lot watching Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar. I learned so much about, you know, these African American families that were still land holding in the South, running operational sugarcane plants, not plantations, but they operated sugar mills, and just that story is based on a real event. And just how today conversations of systematic racism, inequality are still so prevalent and relevant today. Would you say, or what is your perspective even, how the hospitality spirits industry is responding to those diverse narratives that are being raised?
You know, the thing about our industry is that it is about hospitality, right? And I think 99% of us are here because we like people and we like serving people and we like offering people positive experiences. You know, there's always bad apples in the bunch, so it's not universal, but I like to think, and this is my experience, people mean well and go out of their way to do what they can to help others. I mean, let's just look at COVID. Look at all the bars and restaurants that have been raising money for PPE,
Yes.
getting involved in activism. Like, we're the first ones to get in there and roll up our sleeves. So to answer your question, how is the industry, addressing questions regarding, systemic discrimination or lack of opportunity or whatever? I think it's just baby steps, because to illustrate the point, last year I was hosting seminar rooms at BCB, and one of the seminars was about the topic of women working in hospitality. And there's been a lot of talk about, like, how do we include women in roles of leadership? And towards the end, in the Q&A, a question was posed, okay, so what are you doing, and this is towards the panel, what are you doing to include minorities in your staff? And it was just like, mic drop. And they had no words, but I think it was just because they had not had opportunities to think about or converse on this topic. And I think that's where we are. I think a lot of people are intimidated by the conversation for fear of saying the wrong thing.
Agreed.
And I don't necessarily see any malice. I think I just see a lack of education and a lack of it's just a lack of conversation right now. So people want to do the right thing. I think people just don't know what to do.
And yes, I will say, as I was discussing with Darcy earlier, COVID really has provided such a necessary time within the industry that I don't even think that we realized we needed to have these conversations, because now we have the time. And that we can do it in such a way that, we don't have to physically be in a space together. We can Zoom, we can email. I know I've been really intentional about how I use time during quarantine to reach out to people, to really bridge the gap in ways that if I hadn't had time in previous years or earlier in the year, I now am intentional about that time. So Shannon, would you say when it comes to veterans, influencers in the industry, where do you think that they should be when it comes to a state of accountability? Darcy and I were talking about that accountability from experience, that we do have voices and we have influence, that we can rally for changes and we can have these conversations in spaces maybe that normal or other people would not have access to. So what does accountability look like for the seasoned veteran in the hospitality industry?
Just so I'm clear, accountability in regards to addressing issues of inclusivity?
Yes.
I mean, look, it's all very personal. Let's be fair, right? Everyone has some different sets of issues on their plate, different concerns. Some of us are operators of businesses, and let's face it, that takes up like 110% of your bandwidth. Some of us work in distilling or brewing or in writing, or like myself, kind of straddling that world and being behind a bar. It's a very personal thing. It looks like something different for everyone. So I really hesitate to provide an answer for that. I can tell you my way of doing it, which may not come across as like the way it should be done, but I just have to trust that it's a good way. I just work really hard and I do good work, and hopefully that sends a message to individuals who are questioning whether they belong in this industry or not. Like, maybe I don't have time to be on panels or chat rooms or posting on Facebook or what have you. But I try to let my actions speak for me rather than words.
Yes. And I think example says volumes. And I think that when you can't, again, physically be with someone, what they can go back to is your evidence of work, what you've put out. So I think you responded to that just beautifully. Hannah, it looks like we have a question in the chat if you want to go ahead with that.
Yes, the question is, it's just a clarification, what is the full name of the Queen subject that was under discussion a few moments ago? And if you have any other questions right now, people, leave them in the chat.
Sure. So the discussion was about Ava DuVernay's series, Queen Sugar, that talks about land holding in the South, specific to a family of former slaves that now, present day, the children are now operating the sugarcane plantation, their own Queen Sugar, and just how that applies to modern day in the hospitality industry when we're thinking about agriculture, suppliership, diversity, what role we all play in that, and are we being intentional in that regard and mindful of that. So the series is Queen Sugar.
And it's on Netflix, correct? I think
Yes.
so. Okay, all right. Any more questions, anyone? Nope. Carry on.
All right. So Shannon, let's get into the Tom Bullock conversation. So this book, Ideal Bartender, while one may tend to look at this book merely just recipes, you don't see a lot of personal accounts except for the one in the beginning that talks more to the specifics of Tom Bullock as purely as a mixologist and him being passionate about his craft and how people felt when they consumed these cocktails. But I have always believed, and again, because I started out in bartending, that every cocktail tells a story, and it tells a person, a feeling, something that was going on very poignant at that time. So Shannon, what's your thoughts on the Ideal Bartender and the relevancy of this piece of content to current cocktail culture?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most important things about it is that it was the last cocktail book, bartending guide published right before Prohibition. And so I think when you look at that in the context of books that, preceded it in the, 5 or 10 years prior, it can kind of give you a sense of what was on people's mind or what was in fashion and what was hot and what was cool. The reason why I picked out the Clover Cup cocktail is that it's not his original. In fact, it was it came out of a bar in Philadelphia. I'm blanking on the name. It's in the notes. But, that drink originated in 1896. So why is it that 30 years later he saw fit to include it in his book? And if you look at the book, it stands out from most of the other gin cocktails in there, which are basically martini and martinez variations, like really booze forward or like Tom Collins. So why did he choose this drink? It just seems kind of strange, but I'm glad he did because he made a good call, right? There's the Clover Club in Brooklyn, founded by Julie Reiner, who is seminal in bringing back craft cocktails and, putting together programs that nurtured bartenders that brought back Prohibition era style bartending and got us where we are today. Again, maybe he just liked to drink and he thought it was cute and it wasn't that deep, but I think that his ability to hone in on something like that, amongst all the other things that to me were a little dry and a little, I'm not going to say basic, but a lot of them very standard to bars all over the country. This one was not a standard cocktail, it's a bit of an outlier. So I thought it was cool that he was the only bartender that put it in a book. Another thing that I like to look at and to ask you to consider as well is the foreword to the book. Okay, so the foreword is penned by Herbert Walker Bush. Okay, so this is of DW fame. This is great or great grandfather. And bear in mind that up until the 40s or 50s, if an African American penned a book, it generally required a preface by a white person to validate that the contents of the book were worthy of your attention. Okay, so this is like the beginning of the 20th century. And you have a bartender that has a prominent financier and politician writing a preface to his book. What does that tell you about where he was working and how he was working and why someone would take the time to do that. You know, I want to point that out. I know that's something we talk about, but it's all about framing and context to really understand the significance of it. It's not just the recipes. It's like, let's think about the culture and what was going on at that time.
Yes, I love how you painted that framework, because I think that originally in concept, or most of the time when I see the content of this book utilized, is going straight to the recipes. I don't think we've done a very good setup of framework of analyzing the climate and the culture of the era of a Tom Bullock and other freed African American mixologists too, that were also creating during this time, and that, you know, just really the risk involved. And to me, it really paints an early portrait of allyship, really, that we really had not thought about from this era. That a white person, although Tom was a serviceman, would still say, I'm going to vouch for this man. And he didn't, I love the language that was used in the foreword, never referring to him as a servant, but a mixologist, really putting attention to the title of the work versus, you know, wanting to bring him down to this mere servant making cocktails, that he really gave credit and due respect and homage to mixologists. And I wanted to find out what your opinion is of the term of mixologist versus bartender. I see that come up a lot in conversation, and how important you think the weight of that title holds.
Well, I know mixologist, you know, has been bandied about and it's a little controversial and sometimes looked down upon, but I kind of think of it as like levels of Jedi mastery, right? So when Luke Skywalker started off, he was a bartender, okay? And then when you get to Yoda, you're a mixologist. I always like to joke that it's like, I want to get to the point where I can just put my hand up and then the bottle's going to magically float across the bar. That's how I amuse myself. But yeah, the idea is that, you know, a bartender, the best bartender, is great to experience behind the bar. This is an individual that does the most important and vital things to the service experience, right? So they can see you coming through the door. They're making eye contact. They're scanning the whole bar. They're looking at the levels in the glass. They know when it's time to move left. They know when it's time to move right. You know, everything is like a seamless flow. That's different from being a mixologist. I personally don't know that I'm a good bartender. I'm kind of what I call one of the most graceful, clumsy people that I know. I think I just make up for it with a goofy grin. I'm like, guys, I know this is terrible, but trust me, I got you. So when we look at a mixologist, to me, I can admit to it. But when it comes to mixologist, I think that's when you're talking about someone that has a really visceral feel for ingredients and materials and how to envision them from a, you know, different vantage points that aren't presented to you in drinks that currently exist, or recipes that currently exist, as a little more of a visionary role. Some people are able to be both, but I think we need both poles, and they don't always have to exist in one person, and they're both worthy aspirations.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I love your Star Wars reference. And I think that's the thing that I, Shannon, personally enjoy just about watching and witnessing you educate, how you're able to touch people wherever they are in their educational pursuit. I feel like you speak at a very high level, but you present in a very vernacular way. And I think that everyone cannot do that when they're facilitating and educating. I think it's a very special skill. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, because everyone is loving the Star Wars references.
I mean, look, Andrea, you met me in person. Look, I keep it sucker free. Okay, I'm not afraid to be real. So here we go.
Yes,
can I just, Sterling Stokes, love your comment. We're a little into the program, but I wonder if we could pause a little bit. Can we raise a glass of Juneteenth?
Darcy actually made me a very delicious Silbach. I had the clover before, but Darcy made me a beautiful batch Silbach cocktail. So, and she's also a graduate of the Ideal Bartender School. So
I love it. I'm having my favorite recipe from Tom's book. It's called Champagne on page 22.
Ooh. So, I'd like to propose a toast to Juneteenth, to celebrating freedom, to celebrating that we are all wonderful creators and wonderful human beings, and that we're all striving for life and liberty in our own respect. Here. Shannon.
Cheers, everyone.
So, my personal favorite cocktail in the Ideal Bartender, call me nostalgic if you will, is the old fashioned, because
It does the job.
the old fashioned is my favorite cocktail because when I worked in the Pendennis Club, I mean, it's that one cocktail that when you hear it called, you have to go watch and see it made, because I feel like nobody else in the world makes it right now that I've worked in the Pendennis Club, because there's a Pendennis old fashioned, and then there are all these other riffs. And what I loved about just really the preservation of history and craft, people call it, you can call it old fashioned if you may. But, men would come to the club and they would know if you changed it. Like, they know if it's altered. And I just want to know how you feel about, we're in the era of all these riffs, but we also are experiencing a huge return to the classics. So the one thing I learned at the Pendennis Club when I was learning bartending, they said, before you go off on your own, learn the classics, learn them inside and out. You will be able to make any variation or allow your mind to expand after, but really take the time to learn the classics. So I want to know how you feel about, seeing risks and innovation to classic cocktails.
I despise them. No, just kidding. Look, I believe that there needs to be a little bit of both, right? Because for me, the classics are like what I call wax on, wax off. There's another pop culture reference. It's like Karate Kid is cleaning cars. He's like, I came here to kick ass. Why am I washing your car? I don't get it, right? But in a classic, if you have 3 or fewer ingredients, and depending on your bar, things are going to vary with ice, glassware, what have you, you're really compelled to pay attention to the fundamentals, which will empower you to make whatever you want, as you alluded to before. So classics are fundamental, and I have to say, like, when I go into a bar that has 30 cocktails on the menu, and then I call for a classic, and the bartender looks confused, I'm like, there's a problem here.
Yes.
I wouldn't hire a bartender that couldn't execute a Sazerac, Old Fashioned, Daiquiri, Gimlet, Highball, because if you can't make those, then you're not really going to understand what I'm asking you to do in regards to the cocktails on my menu, because the cocktails on my menu are based on those foundations. So yes, classes are very important. I think that when it comes to making risks, that's an important creative exercise, because we have to keep ourselves stimulated as people who are serving others, people who are looking to offer something that is suited to the guest taste. And so I think the risk really kind of is there so that you can modify something to a guest taste based on the conversation you're having with them. Like, I like to say that I love the bartender choice. Like, that's where I'm like the most awake and most on fire. That's where I get the most inspiration, because I'm really excited to give you as a guest what you want. Like, people are like looking at the menu, they're like, I'm like, that's cool. You don't like the menu? Let's talk about it. Don't feel like you have to settle for something because it's on the menu. Don't feel like I'm going to be like, and you guys have seen this. If you ask me to make something off the menu, like, that's not the kind of bar that I run. That's not what I want from you. I want you to get exactly what you want. And so risk capitalize on your deeper knowledge of everything in your back bar through the lens of classics so that you can deliver what the guest wants and needs in that moment. That's what we're for.
Yes. Hannah, do we have a question?
We do have a question. Some Louisville folks would love to know more about the Pendennis Club recipe and what do bartenders, Shannon was just getting into this a little bit, but what are some riffs on classics? How do bartenders riff on some of the classic cocktails like the Pendennis recipe?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Andrea, I'll let you take the lead on that recipe because you work there, and then I would love to jump in with a riff that I worked on for like 3 years.
Wow.
I know.
How do you follow that up with a classic? So the one big thing that I see when it comes to a variation between Pendennis style and what you would see in modern old fashions really comes down to the ice and the garnish and base spirit of choice. So at the Pendennis Club, the classic old fashioned would be made with a Brown Forman product and Old Forester, a higher proof, of course, something 100 and above, because of dilution of the cocktail and the spirit. And back when I was there in the early 2000s, we were still doing hand chipped blocks. So there were no ice cubes that, came in special shapes. Like, we were hand chipping everything at the bars. And garnish was also different. So where you would espresso with an orange over top after your bitters, the Louisville way is to add a cherry to your garnish. And the bitters that you use. So we were using Angostura in the Pendennis Club, but that was the really big thing. Your base spirit being 100 proof or above, hand chipped ice, perfect cube, what you wanted. And it took a while for you to learn how to do it. And it's very time consuming. Like, on average, it may take you 20 to 25 minutes to craft a Pendennis old fashioned. But people would wait. Like, I would have men that would wait in the parlor for an old fashioned, and they didn't care how long it took. And like I said, they would know if it was wrong, if you altered it in any way. And I think now a lot of restaurants that I go into, they're using 1.5 ounces of base spirit. It was always 2 ounces at the club.
Andrea, may I just offer a little something to this notion of time?
Sure.
Okay, so one of the things that's tricky about cocktail books and recipe books is that you see the recipe, but sometimes it's removed from context. Like, you describing that process at Pendennis, you can't see that in Tom's book, okay? So look at the mint julep. Those recipes were rendered as letters. Gentlemen would write letters to one another being like, I can't wait for you to get here, my niece is like going to be able to pick the mint from the field, it's going to be wonderful, we're going to hang out. Like, it's like 3-page letters, people are like, why are you blowing up my phone with like 9 screens full of text? Like, that level of care and the kind of patience around what it took to go into a drink, not just ingredients and technique, but the sentiment behind it and the time and the process. That was the mentality of crafting drinks, from the golden age up until Prohibition. It's like, you knew that you had to wait. It wasn't just like, it's nice to be this, but it's also cool to have like that more personal touch where someone's spending an afternoon gathering mint for a julep or spending 20 minutes carving a rock of ice.
Yes, and I think that's so important. Something that I enjoyed so much about my time at Pendennis was really learning what I call classic fine dining culture. I mean, because it was very old school, super old world, white tablecloth, like full china, the whole shebang, and just that whole idea of really more of enjoying the experience. No one's rushing through dinner. No one's rushing through cocktail, rushing through coffee, rushing through cigar and bourbon after your dessert. Like it's meant to be an enjoyable, I always refer to it as a well orchestrated experience.
I mean, look, living a good life takes time, so I'm willing to wait.
Very true. And I mean, these men, the members of the club, like, you know, they're investing in their membership. Expectations are high when it comes to service standards. And, you know, I think that we've just, unfortunately, we're in this fast casual, new age.
Andrea, your sound just cut out. Can you try your sound?
Now I'm back. Sorry. So basically what I was saying is, you know, we have all these different styles of dining and cocktail going on. So we're in the era of fast casual, to-go cocktail, modern fine dining. And I love the fine dining experience. I love the 15 to 20 minutes between coursing. I love that no one's going to keep coming to my table every 5 minutes to bug me about, can I get your plate? They're looking for, because in fine dining, you're also taught etiquette, which was something really important. So you would watch for how they would sit their forks and their napkins, and that would tell you whether or not they're ready to proceed to the next course. So just a lot of education for me that was so foundational that took place at fine dining. But I want to speak to Shannon because we are in this wake of COVID. How do you feel about this rise of to-go cocktail culture? I see people batching old fashions and Sazeracs and Manhattans and selling them out of their establishments. And a lot of that has been out of having to generate revenue for these establishments. So Shannon, do you think to-go cocktail culture is here to stay?
I hope so. Every time I leave New Orleans, I feel grief-stricken. You know, my favorite to-go cocktail on the way to the airport is a Sazerac from Lafitte's. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. It's like right on the just so you're leaving the French Quarter, and that place doesn't even have electrical wiring. I think there's like maybe one wall that has an outlet in it. I love this experience of to-go. I know it doesn't translate into every city, but I wonder, like, can we embrace this like kind of more walk around, more community in it together sort of situation? I don't know. In more practical terms, you know, if restaurant's going to be operating at 25, 50, 75% capacity, that doesn't work. So from a practical standpoint, yes, I hope that to-go remains as long as it's needed. But B, like from a artistic standpoint and from a fun standpoint, like I've seen some really cool bar programs like embracing it and making it really fun. Pacific Cocktail Haven in San Francisco has really beautiful packaging, as does Hardwater in Anaheim. Like their packaging is really cool. Here in Brooklyn, you know, there's Barely Disfigured. In Manhattan, there's Undercoat. Like everyone's like kind of throwing out all the stops with their packaging. Up in the Hudson Valley, there's a place called Fuchsia Tiki, and they're just like killing it. So the to-go cocktail is another way to show your level of attention and detail and care, not only in a recipe, but like in your online experience and how you guide people to ordering a drink and the language you use there and the copywriting, which has a sub in for the bartender dialoguing with you. You look at what Hidden Harbor has done. They put out a bunch of like really beautiful online video content to show you what they're making for you. So I'm being a little long-winded, but I think that, I know, is that anything new? But what I'm saying is that the to-go cocktail has challenged bars and restaurants to step up their game, to convey hospitality in a way that you can't do face to face. It's not just like, put it in a bottle, hey, hope you buy it. It's like, I want to really invite you in. I think it's, you know, it's great when it's done the right way.
Yes. So Shannon, everyone is dying to know about this riff on the old fashioned that you have worked on for 3 years. Give us the tea. We need to know. Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, so, you know, this drink is kind of a pipe dream. I've yet to realize it. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that when I came up with the idea, the products that I needed to actually make it work were not available. Okay, so let's rewind the tapes about 8 years ago. And this was when, if you wanted a funky pot still Jamaica rum, the only thing you could find was Smith & Cross by House of Pens, which is actually what kind of seduced me into the world of rum. I was a little bit of a newbie. I didn't realize it was bottled above 55% ABV. And I go to one of my locals and order old fashions with it. And I was like, I love this old fashioned. I love it. And then I found out later when I was like setting up Gladys, I was like, oh, I love how strong it is, but neither here nor there. So that being said, I was looking for a way to utilize various Maros that would stand up to a spirit like Smith & Cross and kind of like use Smith & Cross in lieu of a rye or a bourbon, and use the Amaros in lieu of vermouth to create an analog. And, you know, I was working with Chinar, various types of vermouth, a little bit of Angostura, and just like kind of like tweaking proportions to all hell. And it just didn't work. This was 8 years ago. But nowadays, there's, you know, a range of things. There's Hamilton rums, there's Chinar 70, there's Amar de Angostura. I still haven't figured this drink out, but it's still kind of floating around the ether. I'm just waiting for the right bottle to come along. But my point is, when it comes to riffs, that experiment just kind of points to like the classic being so compelling to me that I want to do it justice, and I would take as much time as it needed and wait for whatever bottle required it to make it come, and I'm not going to force a conclusion. I never felt right about what I came up with, so I never put it on the menu. But I know deep down inside that drink is there waiting to come out at some point, but I just don't have the tools, but I know it's there. I'm waiting for it.
Wonderful. I feel like we're just gonna have like an old-fashioned showdown or something when you come. Like, I will say I do enjoy like tasting different variations of the old-fashioned, but I find that people that sometimes are hyper creative struggle with the classic because it's just putting them in a box. How do you feel about that, Darcy?
There are classic flavors for a reason. Tomato and basil, salt and pepper, peanut butter and jelly. You always return back to the classics to find your riffs. And once you learn how to balance flavors and you have this foundation of knowledge and this love of the knowledge, I think you're able to create some really beautiful things. But it can be a beautiful disaster to get lost in the details. As someone who has been lost in the details of making the perfect Pimm's cup before, I can say that if you love all of the flavors, sometimes that can be a paralyzing factor.
Yes. So Shannon, what is your advice? So I see this influx of young talent coming to the industry, specifically women and people of color. And I'm so excited by their interest, their zeal, and just really their excitement when I see them coming into the industry. What advice would you have for a young prospective bartender or someone that's been in the industry less than 3 to 5 years about how they can plan career success?
Okay, so I'm a really kind of nuts and bolts person, so this advice may not apply to everyone, okay? It's not one size fits all. I am ingredient centric and focus on creation. And sometimes careers don't gravitate around that. But as a general rule, I would say once you identify what you're really passionate about, like some people are really good at tasting, learning, and memorizing hundreds of bottles. Some people are really great at hosting and upselling. Recognize what your strength is. Pay attention. Don't worry about the money. I mean, I know that a lot of us are in service because of the money that we need to survive. But if you want to get ahead, the money kind of follows. I never worried about the money. So it's like, well, what do I want to be really good at? For me, I wanted to be really good with liquid. And so it's just like liquid, liquid, liquid. What can I do to make this liquid work? It's different for everybody. So find out what you want to be good at. A. And then, again, everyone's different. Like, I'm the kid that used to lock myself in my studio on Saturday mornings when I was in art school and turn my phone off. In fact, I had 3 studios so that people couldn't find me because I didn't want to be interrupted when I was working. So if you want to be real serious, find out what you're good at, eliminate distractions, totally dedicate yourself, and don't worry about people that don't like what you're doing or don't support what you're doing. Don't worry about them because they're going to be there all the time. You really got to focus on total dedication to what you know you're good at or want to be good at. Read everything you can. I watch so many videos of bartenders working, of people that work in spirits, like soak up every source of information.
Yes.
Just like immerse yourself and don't worry about obstacles because the only obstacle you're going to face is yourself. Any obstacle is just a mirror that's asking you, well, how bad do you want it? And if you want it really bad, the obstacle, it doesn't stand up.
Yes. I'll tell you, my first Derby week at the Penn Dentist Club, it was like preparing me for life. So people don't realize, Derby for most people is one day. In our city, it's a week because we have all these pre-events. People are coming in. So at the club, technically, it starts Wednesday. You have breakfast, luncheons, all sorts of things. A lot of people are doing a lot of entertaining at that time. So I would have to flip bars and our grand ballroom and our tea room 4 times a day. So I was working 14-hour days, really. I would literally leave the club, go around the corner to my apartment, sleep a few hours, come back, flip, and do it all over again the next day. But I feel like I learned so much, like in the beginning, because an older gentleman, Collins, that worked there with me, he had been at the club for like 35 years. And he told me, he said, kid, if you're gonna be here, use it to your advantage and learn everything. And that's when I learned the saying of full hands in, full hands out. And I would help in the kitchen with prep. I was doing setup and takedown. I was doing cigar cuttings and bourbon pairings in the smoking lounge. I just learned how to be so versatile and valuable at the same time. And I really encourage younger people coming into the industry that they take on that same interest, that you not get so married to one thing because you may miss an opportunity to learn something else that you could be just as passionate about. And it really prepared me for management as well, that I could really learn people management because that's so important when you get into management. So I feel like I learned everything at ground zero that I don't think any other establishment in the world or any professional experience could have prepared me for. So I'm really indebted to the club for that experience, but I do not really miss being a full-time working bartender. It's very strenuous on the body. So I always commend you all that still do that for full-time because I know that you love it and that's a part of why you're there. So Shannon, I have to ask, so Tom Bullock took on pre-Prohibition cocktail leading us into Prohibition. Shannon, you took on Tiki for your book, Tiki Modern Cocktails. What really drew you into taking on Tiki as from a cocktail spirit history subject?
Well, it's a pretty easy answer. The rum made me do it.
The rum. Blame it on the
rum
rum.
made me do it. I mean, look, I worked in bars and hospitality for some years prior to opening up the program at Gladys Caribbean, but I mean, this is like a fraction of what I have in my house. It's like a sliver. I just fell head over heels for it. You know, prior to getting into working on that program, yes, Jeremy, you're correct. Jasper said the same thing. Yeah, the rum made me do it. You know, I spent some time working in wine, and what I thought was really cool about rum is that it is produced globally and expresses so many different cultures. So it wasn't just like, oh, what's this rum like compared to this rum like? It was like, what is this place in this culture, in this time, and these people, and this music, and this cuisine? Like, it was like just kind of like opening up the world to all these places to go and vibes to feel, not to mention the range of liquid expressions was mind-blowing. So, you know, from a, you know, I like wine as a category to I like culture, it just was like hitting all the right notes. Not to mention when it's time to make some drinks, everything you want from like a vodka profile to a gin profile, believe it or not, rum and tonic is delicious, to a bourbon scotch, cognac profile, you can find all of that within the category. So I was just like, I can do whatever I want. So when it comes to Tiki, that's what Tiki is. You take delicious things, you make unlikely, surprising combinations, and you blow people's minds. And so I love that creative challenge, and it just so happened that, you know, when I was coming up, like rum was kind of like the spirit. That was the first gateway drug, so to speak, into Tiki genre. And then as I started spending more time with it at my bar, I was like, wait a minute, I can use agave and mezcal and whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, what is it in the end? That's what I came to. So for me, working in the Tiki space and working my book was about, I just want the flavors that excite me and the flavors that I think are going to make cool journeys for people. It's just like, how can I put you onto something that maybe you didn't think that you liked, be it rum or otherwise?
Yes, and I loved the book. I was like, oh, every time I see bourbon in a book, I get excited. Like I'm a bourbon person, so I was like, oh, Shannon put bourbon in some of the Tiki cocktails. I was like, yes, I can get down with this. And I just like the ease of your recipes. Like it just didn't feel intimidating and very approachable. So would you say that's important for a prospective bartender if they're considering, you know, getting into the writing side? Is it important to be approachable, intentional in your writing and what you're crafting and thinking about the audience for your book?
Well, first, I would not encourage anybody to get into the writing side. No. No, yes, you have to be intentional and think about the audience. But look, I didn't have that skill. You know, most cocktail books are co-authored or heavily influenced by an editor, which is the case in my book. You know, Jono, you know, he wrote cookbooks prior with Rizzoli. So it was like, hey, so you got to think about this person that doesn't know the bar, doesn't know this ingredient, like present it that way. And I didn't know how to think that way. So I would say, yes, if you want to write a bar book, that is going to come up, but don't feel like you have to edit yourself. I would say find a good editor or find a good second opinion or third opinion, whatever, because you shouldn't edit yourself. That's someone else's job. You got to put down what you believe you want to convey, and then someone can help you shape it into a way that work freelancing you want to hit. But yeah, you have to realize that there's a little bit of translation work that will need to take place, but it doesn't have to be your job. Just put it down and let someone help you out.
Yes, I agree. I'm working on my first book, and it has not been an easy feat. But I feel like it's challenged me in ways that I never expected. And I'm just really enjoying the journey. It's allowing me to go back to think about just my own spirit's journey and how that translates to how I commune with others. And it's made me be very transparent. It's made me cry sometimes. I mean, you just really go on an emotional journey when you're writing, and you're putting yourself out there for people to say, yes, I like the book, or no, I didn't like the book. So it's a lot of risk involved. But in the wake of COVID, I see really just this evolution of the working bartender, that they cannot be this one thing. They can't just be a working bartender, that it would behoove them to consider taking on the writing space, even though it's challenging. But content creation, all of these things, because what we know about the business model of hospitality from COVID, that it's going to change. The traditional model that we knew hospitality to operate in, for needing all these hands and operating at full capacity, we're not going back to that model. So what would you say, Shannon, like in the wake of COVID? I know we're not going to campaign for everyone to write, but what are some other ways that you would suggest that bartenders can be innovative in generating revenue for themselves, be it becoming an entrepreneur or other ways to help their businesses be more viable? Shannon had a drink. Let's drink.
Well, I mean, I would just say that everything is so early in the process that I think it's important to just observe yourself, observe, how you're responding, what's going on. Focus on your personal needs, because you have to fulfill your needs before you can offer anything of service to the outside world. Be open-minded. Maybe you will remain in the bar world. Maybe you'll be working in an endeavor that doesn't involve being behind a bar, but still speaks of hospitality. I would just say, give yourself permission to have an open mind, ask questions, reach out to people. Maybe there are people you've been wanting to reach out to for 5 years and say, hey, I would love to come tour your distillery, or I'd like to spend a weekend with you in your vineyard, or can I come observe you adding yeast to the fermentation? I think at this point, people are really open to connecting and sharing information and expertise, right? Not to say that people aren't busy, we're busy with different things, but I think people that make an effort to make connections and to offer, themselves as a way to, like, I want to learn, I want to contribute. I think that's the way. Like, who have you wanted to call for the last 5 years?
Yes.
Call them. What have you wanted to learn for the last 5 years? Find out where you can learn it. I would say this is time for learning, because the answers are not readily apparent. And I think through learning, connection, and conversation, then you can start to come up with those answers.
Yes. And something else that I attribute a lot of my own personal success to is I removed ego, and I really felt like I wanted to be a forever student of the industry. I never wanted to get to this place of feeling that I had arrived, or that I was better, or that I had reached my pinnacle. I recently celebrated 10 years in this industry, and it feels like I've been here 5 minutes, honestly. I mean, and I feel like I haven't even really scratched the surface of the things that I want to do. And that's something that I always share with younger people, that, all masters started as students. And some of us will continue in that continual education. If they're offering a class on a level of technique that you feel like you just mastered, go anyway. You would be surprised. There's innovation in our industry happening every day. You don't know everything. That's something that I appreciated about really being humbled by people that I allowed to master me and really spent time with them and learning different skills, is that, you know, get it out of your mind that you know everything, that you have arrived. I'm really big on not missing opportunities, because ego can really get in the way of your progression, and that it's so important that you have to really take a step back and sometimes go back to the drawing board. I know that I have in my own professional journey. I've had to go back and say, well, no, I don't like this job, or I don't like this line of work. I don't like where I'm going down the rabbit hole. So let me go back and recreate something new. So Shannon, we also know that the hospitality industry itself, a lot of that service labor was built on African American laborers, women, men. And something that I enjoyed, I was telling Darcy that I watched Becoming again the other day, Michelle Obama's documentary, and she talked about how in the White House, it was so important for her daughters not to view Black servicemen as this vision that was what Black men would be, waiting on you hand and foot, dressed in tuxedos, and being of service at your beck and call. She said because she looked at a lot of those men in the White House as her uncles, the former porters in Chicago, and things of that nature. How important is it for African American talent to be forward in preserving the narrative and the history of service when it comes to hospitality?
Yes. So, I mean, I think there's a couple things to parse out here. So, the unavoidable topic of, like, you know, servants in the big house, right? It's not a cute look.
Yes.
But when you consider that, you know, the first White House chef was an African American gentleman, or ADOS, whatever term you prefer,
Right.
African descendant of slavery.
Yes.
His name was Hercules, and he did his work well enough to warrant having a portrait painted of him, and it's in the National Gallery to this day. And then you go to Thomas Jefferson's chef, Hercules. Sorry, James Hemings, my bad. He was educated in France.
Yes.
He did stages that I don't even know who coming out of America would have had access to that education. And then he brought that back to Monticello and did the synthesis of what he learned in France, what he could access via his family and their roots, and what was available in terms of American produce, right? And so the work he did in Monticello, which was designed to impress upon visiting diplomats that America had a culture and a level of sophistication, that was riding on his back. Okay, and so that level of American cuisine and service had a lot to do with his work. So when we look at, like, a fine dining culture, kind of had its roots in his work, as well as butlers and maids and everything that came out of plantation culture. So it doesn't look good on film. It doesn't look good in popular culture, but we got to give ourselves credit for what we contributed to setting the standards, not only for service, but also for execution in food and beverage in America. There would be no Chez Panisse, there would be no Thomas Keller, there would be none of this stuff without us setting a tone. And so I know that, you know, after the World Wars and GI Bills, you know, a lot of us are really eager to get out of service because of that negative connotation. But I think we should own the heritage and be like, actually, this is our stuff. Can we not be proud of our work and how to set American food culture up to be what it is? I don't want to discount what people did before me. I want to pick it up again and bring it out to light. It's like, now I'm going to get a little hood. It's like, why is American food popping?
Exactly.
Why do you have so much fun going out? I'm just saying, like, it's nothing that, for me, it's a really proud history, even though it's been under tenuous circumstances. So much good stuff that people are emulating all around the world came out of it. Then you need to recognize and promote that.
You know, I'll share when I first started historical curation in the food and beverage space, specific to distilling and having to go to so many historic spaces that I did between Louisville all the way up to the East Coast. I think in total so far I've been to about 10 different plantation sites or historic spaces, and I've never been so proud of the bravery, the intelligence, the strength of my heritage, and I've never been so proud and honored to have the privilege and platform to share that with others and to really just uplift these narratives and these stories. Some people, when I'm going through archives, only have a first name or a nickname, and then there's nothing else about them maybe but their age and maybe their skill set or something about them that made them stand out on that property. But I always go back to thinking of, I've seen people in records that are my age, and it makes it so real for me. And it makes me feel like I've really been called to something that is much bigger than me. And because of that, I have to really approach it with a very different respect and regard. I have families that reach out to me all the time because people are at home digging, trying to figure out who they are and their identity in this world. And they'll find birth certificates saying, oh, my grandfather worked at this distillery, or I found this item on our property. And, you know, really meeting with these families and helping them dig through their stories have been, it's really been an honor for me, and overwhelming at the same time. And it just has really given me a certain peace and enjoyment in my work that I really wasn't initially looking for. I felt like I was on a scurry and a hunt to find one thing, and my mind has just been open to so many things, and what I'm learning about my people. And when I held my first lecture, I had a lot of people attend that were much older than me, had lived longer than me, and that they were just so open and receptive, and that moment was so warm to me that it makes me feel like what Fawn Weaver talked about in her speech earlier in the week, that there's hope. It gives you that glimmer of hope that we are going somewhere, that progression is being made, and that this work is not in vain. And I cannot tell you, I'm just so excited, and I'm so honored to be in this space with you, because who would have imagined in 103 years that we would be talking about this and raising the narrative of a Tom Bullock, and now we have a Shannon Mustipher, and you know, who will we have next? Who's up next? I'm very excited to see. I wanna live to see what other creators come in and their narratives and perspectives in this cocktail space. And just want to reiterate that historic preservation is so important, again, because people are looking for that identity. I know that people have issues with the preservation of plantation sites and these spaces, but they're really our only true connector to figuring out who we are. And when I step on these sites or I call people, I've never had a plantation site or historic space I've been to that ever denied me access. They've always been very open and transparent, and I appreciate that. But even once I'm there, there's a lot of work. I literally went through more than 500 pages of documents my first day at Locust Grove, and there's so much more. So much more work to be done. And something that I was able to do during quarantine for bartenders that were out of work, they helped me go through a lot of research, and I had to help them process reading some of these documents because they are heartbreaking. They're not the best stories, and who wants to read a ledger about someone being torn away from their children? But just really helping them get through that process, and it let me know that there's a need for clarifying and opening the space for historical narration and why the preservation of it is important. So Shannon, what is next for you? Inquiring minds want to know. And just so you know, in the chat, they have named your next book, The Rum Made Me Do It.
Okay, I love that name. It's really going to be up to my publisher and editor to come up with it. But I'm glad you asked. I have to give you guys a 2-minute warning. I'm going to have to attach a charger to my phone, but I will answer this question in the interim. What's next for me? I'm pivoting into drinks journalism. I filed my first story for Thrillist last week. It's up. It's on the Tiki, which is a cocktail that's dear to my heart, and I'm working on pieces for a few other institutions as well. So it's more of the same. Some writing, doing some editorial stuff. Maybe dipping my toes into some product development, but I gotta stay coy here. Basically, here's my thing. If the work is good, if the work is flavorful, you will find me there. I'm kind of no limits with it. I don't know if you guys know Master P. That might be a little old school. Yeah, I heard you laughing. You know what I'm talking about. I like to say I was born in Charleston, raised in Atlanta, which means that I'm double dirty.
He said make a fan.
Right, I know. My sister tells me that I'm wrong and I need to stop, but I won't.
I love that everyone's so engaged in this. This is great.
Anyway, but my point is, like, I'm a little voracious. I'm very voracious. I just love to learn, as you pointed out. I love to participate. I have to stop myself. I'm like, girl, you need to go to sleep or do something, but I just don't like stopping. I don't know. I drink a lot of water. I don't know what else to say. Like,
we're gonna get you an assistant, Shannon. I think you need an apprentice or something.
Well, Rory was here and he already referred me to someone. I just need to call her. So.
Awesome. We have to help each other. What do we believe in, Darcy? If you can't take it on your plate, take it off. Find someone else that's better.
I'm greedy. Okay, hold that thought. I'm going to plug my portable charger in, but I'm still listening to you guys, right? Okay. Sounds good?
And also, everyone keeps asking about this lovely bar cart in the background.
Oh, that's more than a cart.
Yeah, we do a bit of event styling here. So these are part of the tools that we use to make intimate vignettes happen in a very large space. At the top are some tools that are courtesy of Cocktail Kingdom that I won during my first cocktail competition. So, and then of course, everything is accented by the Ideal Bartender. This is Andrea's replica of what the original looks like.
Yes, so this is definitely a reprint. I am, however, on the hunt for at least a second or third edition. It has to be somewhere in the world. Maybe next time I go to Europe, I'll stumble upon one in a bookshop or something. Fingers crossed.
If I may break in briefly during this pod, Cocktail Kingdom has generously donated a copy of the Ideal Bartender reprint to everyone who attended this program. So,
yay, Cocktail Kingdom!
Everyone, please stay tuned to your email. If you signed up not through email, please email me, Hannah, at marketing@locustgrove.org. And I'll be sending out within the next 2 weeks a promo code for you to go to Cocktail Kingdom's website and order your very own copy of this book. So you can go ahead and make sure I have your email. I think I do. But if you want to double check, marketing@locustgrove.org. Thank you, Cocktail Kingdom.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you to the wonderful team and their generosity at Cocktail Kingdom.
And Greg at Cocktail Kingdom, and Shannon's back We do have a couple questions, but I will let you guys continue with what you were doing until you're ready for questions.
Yeah, I just got to give a shout out to Cocktail Kingdom. The owner, Greg Baum, reached out when he caught wind of this seminar yesterday personally to offer up these books. So I would encourage you to take him up on that offer. It's very generous, and it's a beautiful volume.
Yes. If you're looking for bar tools, also, these came from Cocktail Kingdom.
Tell my
They have
dad I was
several
doing this,
fantastic
but
brands.
Can't pay attention. But my point is, you should have this book.
Yes.
All right. Do we have other questions?
Hannah,
Where
do
do
you
we go
have
from here?
questions?
I do. Just a second. We've had a lot of really exciting conversation in the chat. First of all, everyone is very excited that our book name is on the table because the rum made me do it. That feels good.
That's such a catchy, I mean, that's good.
Title.
Can I circle back a little bit?
Mhm.
Andrea, I didn't have this handy. When you pose the questions, do rum brands address the question of the history behind rum production? And there is one brand that does directly address this, okay? So I hope you guys can see the label. There's a little bit of shine on it, but this is Denizen Dark. It's a blend of Guyana and Martinique rum. And it's bottled at 50% ABV, 100 proof, and it commemorates the 1823 slave rebellion in Guyana.
Wow.
So this is a brand that makes an overt and direct reference and pays homage to the role that slaves, African captives, played in like not only bringing rum to the Americas, but also in demanding freedom and equity. So it is here, the Denizen Dark.
So for everyone, the brand is Denizen, and we'll provide a link to that in your follow-up communication after the conversation.
Full disclaimer, I work with this brand and I helped them to come up with the proof. I was pushing for 55, but 50 it is, but it's delicious.
That is so exciting. Shannon.
Andrea, when we going to speak again?
Do we have any? So we're definitely getting together for Swig Culture 2021. Have that coming 2021. You'll definitely be in Louisville, Kentucky at Locust Grove in 2021. We'll definitely work on that. We're just waiting on the world to safely reopen. Don't want to compromise anyone, but everyone hasn't seen you make a cocktail and they haven't had your cocktail. So it is my duty to make sure that people of this fine city.
Sounds like a worthy endeavor. I'm there for it.
So we'll have to do something else around more rum cocktails at Historic Locust Grove and get you out here so you can connect with the property. And the team will love you. You met everyone and they're already like super in love with you. So
we are huge Shannon Mustipher fans in our Locust Grove group chat. And we're just so grateful that you both were able to join us today. Do you have space in your brains for just a couple more questions?
Bring it.
Okay. Can you talk about the history of the pony and jigger units of measure that Tom Bullock uses? Since everyone's going to get a copy of this book, what is the pony and the jigger and how did they get started?
Sure. So the pony is shorthand for little wine glass. Do I have an equivalent of it here in the bar? Maybe. All right. So this is a vessel that comes from plantation rum. It is about 2 ounces. Okay. So wine glasses back in the day were about 3.5 to 4.5 ounces, and that was the measure. And this is when you were making cocktails that were relying on one base spirit and drops of modifiers or bar spoons of modifiers. So let's take the brandy crusta as an example. One of the first cocktails that bridged the old fashioned to what we call a fancy drink that did incorporate a little bit of citrus. So as time went on and you get into the 1850s, you need a more precise measurement, and it's not just like a wine glass that has like 3 or 4 ounces of spirit in it, but you're starting to do spirit measurements as well as liqueurs and syrups and juices, and to the jigger where you have 1, 2, 3/4, half ounces. So the pony was something you could use in the beginning where there weren't that many things going on, and then as time goes on and you have other elements to factor in, you get the jigger.
Yes.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. I now understand measurements more than I did when they were taught to me in 4th grade. Briefly, we did have a question early on about Tom Bullock's background. Can someone give like a 3-sentence biography of Tom Bullock if you're just hearing about him for the first time today?
So, what we know very briefly of Tom Bullock, born in Louisville. I don't have the exact date with me, but was born in Louisville, the son of a slave. We do know that he did marry and that he did have children. He, at some point in his career after leaving Louisville, he went north to St. Louis. He worked at a country club there. And then we know he did do a stint on train service. And he does have some surviving relatives that are still living, none that we know of that are in industry, but a grandnephew was present for the opening of the Tom Bullock Lounge when it opened in 2009, I believe, or 2017. Yes, 2017. But the family really didn't know very much about his contribution to cocktail culture, so they're actually learning along with us. So I'll be very interested to see if any descendants do decide to get into cocktail culture, because something that we do see in the Nearest Green legacy is that the great-great-great-granddaughter, Victoria Edie Butler, is now a blender for Nearest. And I mean, if you've ever had any of her spirits, they're amazing. So I would dare to say that there's some stuff in the DNA. So, so I'm really hoping that descendants of Tom Bullock will get into the craft.
That's fantastic. That's great to know that there are still descendants of Tom Bullock out there. Both, I think, like actual descendants and descendants in the spirit of Tom Bullock.
Yes.
And so our final question, Tom Bullock dedicates this book to people who enjoy specific spaces that they may learn to prepare for themselves what is good. Do you think that Tom really enjoyed working behind the bar? And how do you prepare people to learn for themselves what is good?
I'll defer that question to Shannon.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, I just don't know. I wasn't there, right? I mean, I had one instance in my service career, and this was in Nashville. Granted, the gentleman was drunk, where he snapped at me, and I was like, okay, let me not break character here. This is ridiculous, but, you know, I'm in a different environment. So who knows what Mr. Bullock encountered in terms of how his patrons address him. Maybe some good things, maybe some not so good things. But that's the life of a bartender. There are a lot of patrons that don't appreciate what you do, and that's just par for the course. But you don't focus on those people.
Right.
You do, you know, just give them the best service possible, regardless of their unfortunate attitude or approach. I think that the reward is the work, and I hope that I'm not putting words in his mouth that don't belong there, but at least what I found is that I just want to be really good at my job of serving people, no matter how nice, not nice, sober, not sober, pleasant, hostile they are. It's like, regardless of your state, if I decide to put myself behind a bar, that's my choice, then I'm serving you. I'm not a victim because I put myself there. And so it's my job at that point to guide the interaction to the most pleasant and peaceful conclusion. But you guys got to take it with a grain of salt. I'm a student of Aikido, which is the gentle way, which means that you throw a punch at me, I'll just be like, all right, let's find a way to get you home safe.
I agree, Shannon. I really, I can't imagine, and that's why I say it's very hard to paint a portrait through the lens of someone else, just really merely through a book. When I think about that era, think about him, I think that what I read and what I connect to is that he really focused on his craft, and that he put all of his emotion, and I think everything that he was feeling and or not feeling, the respect, the disrespect, the love of it, everything, he just put it into his work. And that's not to say that you should disregard any manner of disrespect or discrimination, but I think there's something to be said about how you triumph through that and the kind of tenacity that it took even in that era to be a Tom Bullock, to know that you had something special about you, that you were able to connect to people through the world in a very special way that transcends color, race, and all these other things that make us different. And I do believe that the spirit of Tom Bullock is very present. It's present in you. I see it in Darcy. I see it in all this new talent in the industry, and I'm loving it. It really helps me to be hopeful that we are making the progress that we need to in this industry. We're not perfect. We have a ways to go, but that together, we're better together is the way that I feel about it. Allies such as Historic Locust Grove, Cocktail Kingdom stepping in to donate books, that's just evidence that people want to advocate in the way that they see fit. We need to allow space for that, and that we are just on the verge of something very special. We've got to constantly cultivate it. We've got to be intentional, and like I said, so I don't want to hold everyone. We've gone over 4 minutes. I just want to take the time again to thank my wonderful family at Historic Locust Grove, Hannah, Brian, Caitlin, everyone there. Carol, you have been wonderful. You are an amazing leader. You have been an amazing ally when it comes to making sure that the narrative at Locust Grove is diverse and inclusive. You have really been a champion, and people don't know that. They haven't been able to see it, but you have been very intentional in how you lead your team internally and externally. I want to thank Monica Wolf, the board. They have been very supportive. They've been lovely. Every time I step on the property, I've been treated with nothing but respect. And anyone that I've ever bought on for a panel or to be a part of, everyone who's been completely inviting. They're very excited about the programming and special things that we have coming up at the property. Shannon, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I could not think of a better person to celebrate Juneteenth with. And thank you all so much for tuning into this conversation. I hope that you will consume responsibly, consider diverse narratives, and that in everything you do in word and deed, be a verb and not a noun.
Take action, y'all. That's what I got to say. Whatever you want to do, forget the problems, forget the obstacles. Take action.
And make sure you all follow Shannon, shannonmustipher.com. Follow Shannon on IG. Be looking out for her future products and projects. Shannon and I are working on something fun as well. Just gonna throw that dot out there. And and at Historic Locust Grove, they're all about preserving the frontier of Louisville life from the 18th century perspective. We have a farm distillery project. We also have a slave dwelling project that we're actively working on. You can always support those projects at locustgrove.org. And Children Should Not Hunger will be receiving all the proceeds from today's conversation that's headed up by Leo Braddock. We want to make sure that even in the wake of COVID, suppliership issues to food, no child should hunger. Thank you
so much. Thank you, everyone, so much. Please stay tuned to your email and have a great weekend. Cheers. Bye, all.
Cheers, everybody. Bye. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.